Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com and all the fine members who support our endeavors, even if we're a little bit late for takeoff sometimes. We always land and we always have an entertaining flight. We have a long history of stories that are coming to us tonight. I've got several technical issues. I got some delays we're working through, but let's hit this week in Grand Theft World history. Donald Trump was indicted. And that's not a surprise to a lot of people. You saw this unfolding. But what people aren't seeing is that this is the way banana republics work, where you put your political enemy in jail because you can't beat them with logic and reason. It is really the epitome of intellectual self-defense bankruptcy. There is no justification for this.
A leading Republican candidate in the 2024 presidential race faces the prospect of being on trial while running for office. Thursday, he pled not guilty to 4 charges that he attempted to overthrow the 2020 election. CBN's Brody Carter reports on the arraignment and the legal fight ahead.
Protesters on both sides faced off outside the federal courthouse in Washington, where the former president was arraigned Thursday.
Trump's going to march on. He's probably going to get more popular.
Just blocks away from where the riot at the nation's capital played out, Trump entered the courthouse through an underground garage. Outside, his attorney calling the charges a political witch hunt.
There only has to be proof that, number one, President Trump believed that this election was not completely honest. And number two, Jack Smith has opened himself up to a can of worms that we can now look at and really examine.
The arraignment described as routine, but it was the 3rd time in 4 months Mr. Trump has been booked and processed. He pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him. Those charges include conspiracy to obstruct the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, specifically the January 6th proceeding of the presidential results, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and obstruction of rights. Altogether, the maximum penalties add up to more than 50 years. The judge then ordered Trump not to discuss the case with any potential witnesses. Before boarding his plane for New Jersey, the former president repeating the charge that this is all an attempt to interfere with the 2024 election.
When you look at what's happening, this is a persecution of a political opponent. This was never supposed to happen in America.
Now, in a savvy move forward, Vivek Ramaswamy has filed with the Justice Department a lawsuit that says what you guys are doing to these political candidates is wrong. Even if he's running against Trump, he's looking at the meta picture of defending our political system and making it not so much a political injustice system. Maybe that would have been a better title tonight, the political injustice system, for this episode of 144. Now, alongside Trump's indictment, you got a Biden situation. Now, there's a little crossover in these two stories because the judge who just indicted Donald Trump used to be part of Hunter Biden's law firm. Yeah, you can't make this sort of news up.
Donald Trump has been indicted on conspiracy charges. They say he conspired to defraud the U.S. They twist his words to make it seem like he was doing things he wasn't actually doing. And their argument is Trump knew full well he lost the 2020 election, and he and his co-conspirators attempted to lie to the American public and the government to try and steal power. I'm just going to say it outright. There is not a single cell, a single atom in the body of Donald Trump that thinks he lost 2020. And the idea that you can claim Trump secretly believed he lost the election and was lying about it, I mean, that's just absolutely absurd. You can't simultaneously claim the man's an egomaniac and he puts his name on everything, but that he also thinks he could lose an election in 2020. No, Trump genuinely believed this. And more importantly, he was acting on advice of counsel. He had lawyers telling him what to do. Now, of course, Jack Smith, the man prosecuting Donald Trump, is claiming that those lawyers are actually his co-conspirators. Well, how about that? You got to look at this indictment, man. I'll bring it up and I'll show you. It's fascinating. They use things like Donald Trump saying to remain peaceful and not to be violent was proof that he was trying to instigate January 6th because he should have said leave, and that he was saying stay peaceful to imply they were peaceful. It's like, yo, You ask Trump to make a statement. He says, everyone's just stay peaceful, okay? And they go, aha, that proves it. And that's where we are. But my friends, ladies and gentlemen, the fix is in. Take a look at this story from the Daily Mail. D.C. judge who will oversee Trump's criminal case is the toughest punisher of the January 6 rioters and worked for a law firm associated with Hunter Biden. I love how they say associated with Hunter Biden, because my understanding is it is a law firm where he worked. Now, you can argue what does that really mean? They were the same company. It's one big happy family tree, son. And you'll see soon when they arrest Donald Trump for treason, to borrow the line from Rap News. I'm being facetious. I don't think they're actually going to try Trump for treason or anything like that. Just playing with words there. But the point is this. It's a big club and you ain't in it. Trump ain't in it either. You know what I think? I think Donald Trump wasn't supposed to win in 2016, but he did. They thought he was going to lose. They had plans he was going to lose. Hillary Clinton got really angry. She was supposed to win. It was her turn. You see, she was supposed to win in 2008. But Barack Obama came up and he won. He took it from her. And that was it. And they said, yeah, well, hold on. You know, once Obama is out, it will be your turn. So what happens when it's not her turn? Oh, boy, is she angry. And the Bidens, they're all part of the same club. It is the establishment. It is the uniparty. Now, I got to be honest. I'm not completely convinced that the uniparty is as unified as people might assume. I think it's more like this. You take a look at, say, like the Bush administration. I think they oppose each other in the same way that, like, when you're playing cards with your friends, you oppose each other. You might have disagreements on which sporting team you want to win, but you're still cracking that beer, cheers, ordering the pizza and wings, and watching the game. And that's what it's like. They're all one big happy family tree, right? They're all part of the same club, but they want to run things a little differently. So long as they stay within the confines of how things are supposed to go, seems to be okay. That means if it was like Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush won, they'd be angry, but they wouldn't be that angry because they know it's like, okay, well, I guess I didn't get it. But when Donald Trump wins, they're like, this guy ain't in the club. Okay, he's rich, he's powerful, but he was not supposed to win. And then Trump walks in and says, listen, we're going to do these things. And they're like, no. You're allowed to do only A, B, and C, not 1, 2, or 3. And Trump says, I'm going to do whatever I want. And here we are.
It's something that Tucker Carlson did a couple months ago. He interviewed the DC police chief about January 6th. Now, what Fox News didn't see fit to show you was this piece of footage where he says, it looks like a little inside job. So we're going to see that leaked footage from this past week circulated, and it has a couple technical glitches in it too. But I think you can make out why Fox would edit that out and why people went through great pains to bring this back to the public, because the perspective it now creates is a larger perspective. And when you see that larger perspective, you can't limit yourself to that small-minded, nonsensical narrative of an insurrection caused by Donald Trump, when people on the other side were instrumental in creating that insurrection atmosphere in the first place.
You're very restrained and rational and not giving an overstatement, obviously, but the facts that you're describing are shocking.
I was going to say, the reason why I've had a lot of people ask me, why did you write this book? I try to do what I can to get the truth out.
Yes.
They didn't want me to testify on February 23rd at the Senate hearing. They only wanted people that are still currently in positions on the Hill. I actually had to go in and talk to a friend of mine on one of the oversight committees to say, I will come there in person. I want to be there. I want to testify. So I'm glad you think I'm reserved. I'm, to be honest with you, I'm a little pissed off because it doesn't have to happen. If people were reporting the intelligence correctly, if I was allowed to do my job as the chief, I got a significant experience. If I was allowed to do my job as the chief, we wouldn't be here today. This didn't happen. Then see how you're out there, you're lambasted in public. And it's all, everything appears to be a cover-up. Like I said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but when you look at the information the intelligence that it had, military had, it's all watered down. I'm not getting intelligence. I'm denied support National Guard in advance. I'm denied National Guard while we're under attack for 71 minutes. You're in a fight?
Yeah.
A fight for a couple of minutes.
Yeah,
wears you out.
1 minute.
I was going to say, 60 seconds, 3 minutes. Yeah, exactly. Let me tell you, it wears you out. My officers were fighting for 80 minutes before the protesters ever broke the first one with that.
Wait, can I say, so you described this as a failure to get the intelligence to the people who needed it. but it sounds like worse than it sounds like they were hiding the intelligence.
And that's what I'm getting at is, could there possibly be people that actually did something to happen and kind of wanted something to happen? It's not a far stretch to begin.
Well, I don't know what the other explanation is.
You know, it's sad when you start putting everything together and thinking about the way this played out. It gets concerning. What was their end goal? You look at what's happening. Was that their end goal? I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's no question that what happened on January 6th has really helped the Democratic Party. It's bravely politicized the U.S. military and the intelligence agencies and the FBI. And those are all, I think, bad for America and violations of the Constitution, but they're all good for the Democratic Party. That's the fact. Like, that's what happened.
Absolutely. And I write about that because as a cop of 30 years, I'm a rule of law type of guy.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason that Lady Justice is depicted with a blindfold. As soon as you cut that blindfold off, the fairness of our legal system goes out the window. And that is exactly what has happened. They've stripped that blindfold away from Lady Justice, and it's not perceived as being fair anymore.
We also have this week, Ray Epps has accused Joe Rogan of starting January 6th. I know it's hard to understand Mr. Epps' position on that, so we're going to have to take a look at the clip, because from my understanding, from seeing Ray Epps' his texts, and also the recordings that were released, I think it's pretty evident that Mr. Epps, is speaking out his rear end when he accuses Joe Rogan of fomenting January 6th. Last but not least, we have two more stories. There's COVID labs in California being run by the Chinese out of some Airbnb situation. That's not good. We have a press conference to show you about that.
Applications of the illegal biological COVID lab discovered in Reedley in March of this year. It's first important to remember what this community, our nation, the world went through for the last 2.5, 3 years. The COVID pandemic went on for nearly 3 years. It's commonly believed that COVID resulted from a lab leak out of the Wuhan lab in China. Worldwide, there are 769 million cases of COVID that resulted in nearly 7 million deaths. In the United States, there have been 107 million cases and nearly 1.2 million deaths. In California, there have been 103,000 deaths. China's COVID-19 virus resulted in the destruction of lives, livelihoods, the economy, and business. Children were stupidly locked out of school for 2 years and were destroyed academically, socially, and emotionally. People lost their freedoms, were forced to get experimental vaccines, to wear ineffective masks, and were lied to over and over by the CDC and government officials. Any information that challenged the lies and the tyrannical mandates that were suppressed by social media. And we had officials locally that were silent and complicit with all the unconstitutional and destructive government orders. And now they're silent again. So what do we know about this lab in Reedley? Well, on March 3rd, the Reedley code enforcement officers investigated the site after seeing an illegally attached garden hose. On March 16th, the warehouse was inspected, and it was discovered that the lab was producing COVID-19. There is blood, tissue, bodily fluid samples, and thousands of vials with fluids that are not labeled. They also found 900 mice, 200 mice that were dead. On March 16th, the representative from the company, Prestige Biotech, potentially a China national, informed investigators, quote, "These mice were genetically engineered to catch and carry the COVID-19 virus," end quote. Prestige Biotech, that company, is licensed in Nevada, not California. One address listed for this company is a vacant building in Las Vegas. Substack reports that other addresses related to this company appear to be in China, though this can't be verified at this time. And they also report that, quote, "Thousands of packages were found as well, many with shipping labels from China," end quote. On May 4th, the CDC inspected the lab and found infectious agents that were both bacterial and viral in nature. Some of these include hepatitis B and C, rubella, malaria, E. coli, and pneumonia. Fresno Superior Court documents indicate that mice were involved in these experiments with COVID-19. The lab apparently illegally disposed of medical waste, and it's believed it went to the landfill. This can't be confirmed because the operators of the lab have not been forthcoming. Now, questions that must be answered and the public has a right to know. One, is this company from China or is it sponsored by the Chinese government? What was the purpose and goals of their experimenting with COVID-19 and having mice catch and carry the disease? What were they doing with all the bacterial and viral infectious agents found at the illegal lab? Two, are the people that were running and operating this lab Chinese nationals or American citizens? If they're not American citizens, are they here illegally? Three, and most importantly, why wasn't the public informed of this illegal lab and what was found? The Fresno County Department of Public Health, it's public health, has an obligation to notify the public of potential dangers, both past and present. During the COVID pandemic, their medical officer held weekly press conferences justifying ineffective, destructive lockdowns and mandates, and yet not even an acknowledgement to the public of the illegal and potentially dangerous activities at the lab. So he spent a week having the media come, telling the public things that were not true, supporting all of the tyrannical, destructive things that were taking place in our city, our county, our state, our nation. And then when a lab related to COVID-19 is found 5 months ago, no word. No word from him, no word from the Public Health Department, no word from the Board of Supervisors. Number four, the Board of Supervisors are also silent. This is similar to the crisis when foster children were found to be sleeping on floors in offices. They only addressed it when they were forced to because it became public through the media. This is disgraceful and represents a willful decision to hide from and shirk their duties as elected representatives of, guess what? The public. They're responsible to the public. These same Board of Supervisors were derelict in their responsibilities to the public during the pandemic. They were silent and complicit with all of Governor Newsom's destructive, unscientific lockdowns, mandates, and forcing kids out of school for 2 years. Now we have the same cowardice from the Board of Supervisors, and they're silent again when facing another crisis in the county, again related to COVID. The public has a right to know, what did the Board of Supervisors know about the lab? When did they know it? And why didn't they inform the public? 5, are there any current potential dangers to the public as a result of these experiments and illegal dumping of medical waste that involve COVID-19 and potential infectious agents that are both bacterial and viral in nature? Are there any potential adverse impacts to the farms in the area? How about the people in Fresno County or even beyond the local area? We know COVID spread around the world. How can the public be assured no medical waste was disposed of in our water systems? Number 6, were any safety measures in place at this illegal lab to protect the public from spread of COVID or the infectious agents they were experimenting with? We believe COVID spread from the Wuhan lab, and it could have come from this lab as well. Number 7, Lemoore Naval Air Station is only 45 miles from this illegal lab. As was reported in Substack, quote, all of the F-18s for all the Navy's West Coast-based carriers are located at Lemoore. The F-18s are primary strike fighters for the United States Navy. In a war with China, these are the aircraft that we would rely upon to sink Chinese naval vessels and give us victory, end quote. The implications from the spread of a debilitating virus could be devastating to our nation's military readiness. Is the location of this illegal lab coincidence, or purposeful? Now, what do we do with what we've got right now? Well, according to Joe Prado of the Fresno County Department of Health, there's currently no requirements for any lab, licensed or not, to report to the local public health department the biologicals or the testing that is being conducted. I call on the Board of Supervisors to immediately create a new law mandating this requirement in Fresno County, with the penalty of immediate shutdown if the lab is non-compliant. Additionally, there should be financial and criminal penalties for non-compliance. Secondly, Mr. Prado also stated, quote, if you don't receive public funding of any sort, you can, with private dollars, set up a laboratory in California and the United States, end quote, just like was done here. This must change on the state and the national level. There must be enough oversight to protect the public. This clearly isn't the case now, and it must change immediately. And lastly, I don't know when elected officials will learn who they work for. It's for the public. The public has a right to know that after March 3rd, 5 months ago, in a legal lab experimenting with mice with COVID-19 infectious agents, similarly as was done at the Wuhan lab 3 years ago, is going on in our backyard. The public had a right to know. The public has a right to know exactly what they know and when they knew it and what they intend to do about what's going on. Secondly, are there any other labs like this floating around?
And Max Blumenthal has challenged RFK Jr. to a debate. And thus far, RFK Jr. has pulled the Peter Hotez, where he's not going to debate Max, but he's going to talk loudly in public about Max's positions and how they're incorrect, but not going to take the stage. Or maybe if they get through to his PR team, he will end up taking the stage, and we'll see more of that fleshed out.
I love Max Blumenthal, but I do not think he's objective on Israel. I think his reporting on Israel is not it needs to be questioned.
Okay, well, here's what I would ask. Just like, Peter Hotez ducked you and Joe Rogan, I would love, because Max is the guy to talk to about this, not me. So would you do an interview with Max, because he would be able to talk to you about this way better than I can. I'm really not good at this.
Yeah, I would love to talk to Max.
Now, you would think in theory that this would happen. I want to hold on to hope that maybe that would happen, a conversation, a debate between these two. Again, Max Blumenthal, award-winning journalist. So here was him on the Rising.
RFK Jr. sat down with popular comedian and podcaster Jimmy Dore for a conversation. Many people in the chat seem to want you to talk to him specifically head to head because of their frustration with some of his views on Israel-Palestine. He apparently agreed, and you tweeted that debate is pending. Do you have any more details about when we might be able to look forward to seeing you in a head-to-head exchange with RFK Jr.?
Yeah. Now, I would like to see that exchange. Again, obviously, Professor Hotez refuses to debate with RFK Jr. Let's hear what Max has to say.
Yeah, I do. So Jimmy asked RFK, he said, I'm not an expert on Israel-Palestine, but a lot of what you're saying about Palestinians being simply a bunch of terrorists and Israel only attacking military targets and Israel just being this beacon of democracy surrounded by enemies doesn't sound true to me. It doesn't ring true. So why don't you debate someone like Max Blumenthal, for example, who has dedicated years of their journalistic career to covering this issue? I've written 2 books, done a documentary on it. I think I'm qualified. I'm at least as qualified as RFK to talk about it. And RFK is someone, I've been sympathetic to his campaign. I sympathize with several planks of his campaign. So it's not as though I'm coming at him in bad faith and that I'm seeking to destroy him on behalf of the Biden administration or some other force. So I think it would be a civil debate. RFK seemed blindsided by Jimmy's question. Jimmy brought up Peter Hotez, the doctor who RFK had been trying to debate, who shied from the debate, and RFK agreed. But what I've heard, I have a source, and I may actually be able to publish this, I'm not sure. But I have a source who spoke to RFK's communications director, Stephanie Spear, and she completely took off the table any possibility of him doing a debate on Israel. This is while RFK Jr. is running around with Shmuley Boteach, an operative of the Adelson family, the far-right Likudnik family that funded the Trump operation, named for the late Sheldon Adelson, who called for dropping a nuclear bomb on Iran. He's running around with him going to Israel pride parades and making, in RFK's words, the case for Israel. So I think he should engage with people who sympathize with his campaign in the same way and demonstrate the integrity of his position. But that doesn't, I actually am increasingly pessimistic.
We're going to get into it, but first, let's go to Luke Gradowski from wearechange.org and thebestpoliticalshirts.com, and let's see his take on this week in Grand Theft World history.
As your governor, I promise you, whatever challenges come our way, I will always lead the California way.
You literally insane.
I say that's the California way.
You guys are really awesome. Thank you so much.
Based on compassion.
I mean, if we're going to be realistic, they pay you to be homeless here.
Common sense.
Clean and sober is one of the biggest damn mistakes this country's ever made. We all need to self-medicate periodically.
Telling the truth. Telling the truth. Treasuring our diversity.
Use the fist to hit my...
Telling the truth. Following science. Protecting our planet.
Love like yours will surely come my way. Hey.
Gavin Newsom, courage through crisis.
Yeah, and that right there is probably going to be the next president of the United States. I hope you guys will be enjoying the California-ing of America.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.